You're watching the Desert Moon Hockey Podcast with Matt and Rich. Welcome back to episode 18 of the Desert Moon Hockey Podcast. My name is Rich, and over there is Matt.
Yep.
We are doing some smaller news here. We are officially, I believe, in the off season, so it is going to be a little light on content as we go along. We're going to have to think of more creative topics here.
Got it. All right, so we're going to start off by playing some children's trading cards. I'm going to teach you how to build a Blue Eyes deck, and then Richard is going to try to beat me with Exodia. No? Oh,
I
okay,
had
fine.
all I had all the Dark Magicians too. I had an insane amount of Yu-Gi-Oh cards growing up, but I don't know where the heck.
You want to talk about
all mine
insane amount of cards? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have like 6 or 7 full binders of just retired decks of various card games. Plus, like right here, all of just my spare hollow Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Hell yeah. You know, I somewhere I actually have a binder with the OG Season 1 Pokemon cards. I did keep that one. But
you should have sold that last year at the height of like the Pokemon boom, because that
I know
that would have netted you some money.
I thought about it actually when that happened, but I decided not to. I felt like it wouldn't have been worth it to me. Like let's say at its peak, my binder could make me like $3,000 of money.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't feel like it's worth it to me, like for the sentimental reasons, right?
I respect that. I respect you. Even though that's dumb, but I respect. All right. Anyway, the actual topics, other than just children's trading card games.
So 80% of this 80% of this podcast is going to be children's trading cards. The other 20% will be about this trade. So,
like I said, we'll teach you about the Blue Eyes deck, but this Tkachuk trade. Do you want to just lead right off into that? Because this was.
Yeah, this is.
I don't know how Treveling did this. Obviously, he learned from the best. That is Don Maloney. Don Maloney is still the GOAT around these parts. Bill Armstrong is overtaking him, but he's still a GOAT.
Maloney was hit and miss for me. He had some dumb moves. He had some awesome moves. So
I feel like with the shoestring budget, I'm going to compare it
that
all
is
to
fair.
The lack of a budget that he had.
That is very fair. As a GM who had a poverty-ridden budget, he did actually get some stuff done with that budget. I will agree with that.
And then Tkachuk, it was like 4 days ago. It wasn't very long ago. Said, I'm not going to re-sign a long-term contract. Flames fans just lost Johnny Gaudreau. Some of them were coping, saying, oh no, we're not going to lose Tkachuk. He's going to stay. The other half are like, we're going to lose Tkachuk in 5 minutes. Then it happened. I'm not going to re-sign. Everyone was thinking they weren't going to get anything for him. I know in hindsight, it sounds dumb because Matthew Tkachuk career year, 103 points last year, 42 goals. Phenomenal.
If you remember our predictions for the playoffs, I predicted the Flames to win the cup because I thought that line was the best line in hockey.
And that's just how good that line was. He was. I think him and Gaudreau played well. So it's just, yeah. In hindsight, it sounds dumb to think they weren't going to get anything, but it does sound logical because it's like, hey, he's forcing his way out, which is why I'm so shocked. Because people were thinking he's going to St. Louis. They're going to get Torrey Krug as like the number one piece here, and I'm like, I never believed that, to be honest, mainly because what pieces does St. Louis actually have to trade for him? But I'm like, they're going to get something, but I'm not sure what. Jonathan Huberdeau. I'm going to stop there for just 2 seconds. 85 assists in 80 games. I'm not even going to tell you about his 30-goal season. Mackenzie Weegar, phenomenal two-way defender. I've always heard he's just a better defender in general, but he put up 40 points last year, mostly assists. That's two-way. You can't deny it's two-way. Cole Schwint, a 2019 draft pick, and a 2023 first. I think it's top 3 or top 5 protected. So the only way, just for context, the only way for Calgary to lose this trade, it has to be a top 3 pick, so it goes to the next year, and the next year is like 17, 18, somewhere in there, like the second half of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Huberdeau has to not re-sign and not get traded for any value, and Weegar has to not re-sign and not get traded for any value. That is how many things need to go wrong. Schwint is just a bonus. That's how many things need to go wrong for them to lose this trade. Calgary probably wins this trade.
Yeah, it is actually crazy now when you look at the list. Somebody on Twitter, I don't remember who it was, did a breakdown of every single year the first round pick and what had happened to it for the Panthers. And it was like Ekblad, and then it was like traded away, traded away, traded away, traded away, traded away. Lundell, trade away, trade away, trade away, trade away, trade away. And now it's like one more because they traded away another first. Like way out there. What was it, 2026? Like,
yeah, 2026, yeah.
They have sold off the farm and they are going for it. And I honestly am not against it. Like, I respect a GM who's willing to put it out there and go for it, because like if you win that cup next year or the year after, as I'm drawing a blank on the Florida Panthers GM, but like if you win the cup, like you've solidified yourself in that market. You really help yourself become a legitimate team down in Florida. And I think that franchise has desperately needed it. We all know that. You know, it's a franchise that's been struggling. Now, granted, they do have a rockin' deal on a building, and that definitely helps. But, you know, they need something down there. They need some love. And going for it, I understand it wholeheartedly.
Now, obviously, just to be a contrarian, apparently I said 2023 pick, I meant 2026. Thank you, Richard. But just to be a slight contrarian, is if they end up flaming out, and this is the one concern I do have, nothing against Matthew Tkachuk, but he plays more of a power forward style. Look at Lucic. Look how Lucic went from one of the top wingers in the game to an albatross of a contract in like a 2-year span.
Yeah.
Huberdeau probably lasts longer, like in terms of his age when he finally reaches his peak, than Tkachuk. But you're getting Tkachuk, you know, like 5 or 6 years earlier than Huberdeau would be right now, because he's 29, going to be 30. You get a 24-year-old kid, you take that. So there is that slight concern that he could fall off a little bit earlier. But with how great he's played, and I feel like he has the ability to adjust and not just be like a bruising type, I think he'll probably be fine. Just want to acknowledge that real quick. And then on top of that, if they end up just flaming out, either not making the playoffs, constantly getting knocked out in the first, something like that, these trades are going to look terrible in hindsight, because if you're going to take the risk. I respect it. But if you do not hit, if you do not make good contact and send that ball out of the park, at least one conference finals appearance, and they have to make it out of the first round, 3 more times in the next 5 years to make it worth it, I would say. You have to make it out and at least make one conference finals.
I'd agree.
There's going to be some pressure on that, and I think that's fair, but man, they're swinging. I'm waiting to see if they can actually make contact with it, because it'd be really nice for Florida. I'm completely rooting for them. And then shout out to Flying Fluffy, way bigger than us. So if you watch us, you probably watch him. But if you don't, go subscribe. Not sponsored or anything, but the dude literally predicted this trade like 2 or 3 years ago. Like 2 or 3 days ago. I don't know why I said 2 or 3 days ago, and it's weird accuracy. So give him all the credit there. And then from the Calgary perspective, I think I said in my video, I still see them being a playoff team. I didn't see them being like top in their division, because if you lose Gaudreau and Tkachuk, you know, you're getting essentially Gaudreau back with Huberdeau's style. But at the same time, we're not accounting for struggles. We're not accounting for if he wants to be there or not. I was hearing that he made some comments that he wasn't particularly happy with how it went down. That could either make him fire up and increase his value, or that could cause some struggles early on. It's a 50-50 when stuff like that happens. Yep. I'm going to assume he's just going to play well because he's going to be angry. Let's hope for Calgary's sake. So it's like, they're probably still a playoff team, but is there still a realistic possibility that the out of the playoffs predictions or projections, whatever Tkachuk wanted to be traded, still ends up being a reality? Because 2 expiring contracts, we still got to make sure they actually fit in the system and play well. Do you still think there's some risk there for Calgary?
Yes and no. I do think that they are, from last year to this year, a weaker team, losing Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. I do believe so, but to say that they're so bad that they're not going to make the playoffs, I would disagree with. I think that the Pacific is still not strong enough. We do have some up-and-comers in the Pacific that are making some moves and slowly getting better, but I believe that we're going to see a big recession from some teams. One of them obviously being the first team that for the first time this team missed the playoffs, which is Vegas. I don't believe that they're competent enough. They don't have the goaltending. Like, I like Leonard, but there's been some really bad inconsistencies there. And then also, if you look at the Flames, they have Markstrom, which is, oof. All right, let me let you on a little secret. I love Markstrom, so I'm very high on Markstrom. I really like Markstrom, and them picking him up for nothing, I believe it was free agency, that was an unreal signing for them. So having a good goaltender always goes a long ways. Ask any Arizona fan, Arizona fan how that goes in the playoffs. Having an unreal goaltender can literally carry you through multiple rounds. So I'm super high on him. And then on top of that, the pieces that they brought back for the pieces that they lost were not too bad. Like, shoring up your defense, right? That was a big problem. And then adding another high offense, high skilled player with Huberdeau. The biggest knock I've seen with Huberdeau, though, is that he is not very defensively responsible, which is a worry for me, because if you look at that line last year with Gaudreau, Tkachuk, and then it was, oh goodness, was it Giappani?
I have no idea. I didn't watch Calgary last year.
Okay, I don't remember who was on that final part of the line, but that line itself, like when you looked at the advanced stats, it was crazy how good they were defensively and offensively. Excuse me. And that's my biggest fear, is can they get that defensive responsibility this year?
I guess it just depends on who you're throwing on the other wing. One thing I am kind of excited for, I'm also a little annoyed because we were talking about how I would really love to have this player in exchange for Chychrun. Connor Zary is definitely going to get a shot like this year. They're going to have enough lack of depth. Will open and available roster space. Let's go ahead and call it like that for him to get a shot. So I don't know. Like I said, I still think they're probably a playoff team. I still think there is the potential they could slide out because if things don't work out and then you have to sell at the deadline. But I think it's one of those things where there's at least the possibility, and that's pretty good. From what I could tell, the Calgary Flames aren't too bad, so it's not like we're dealing with Leafs fans or anything talking about them. So hope it works out for you. But I'm really hoping that it works out for Florida because, wow, that is a hell of an overextension. That is not talking about the contract. It's a card game term. It's just they put a lot of eggs out there. Let's just see if it all pays off. Now, is there anything else generic NHL you want to get into, or do you want to just jump right into anything Coyotes?
I do have a little bit to just finish up on. It was Lindholm that I was thinking of.
Lindholm?
Not Mangiapane. Lindholm. But yeah. As for to just shore up some loose ends on this, I was gonna say they do have cap space, and Kadri's still out there. We could potentially see them try to go after Kadri, and if so, let me tell you, Mr. Matt, the Coyotes are open for business with taking on bad contracts. If anybody would like some free cap space relief, give us a free first-round pick, and we'll take whatever garbage you got, okay?
If you put a protection on it, I'm not taking it. That was the biggest. That was the biggest gaffe of GMBA's tenure so far. Is that protection on that Dvorak trade, on that Dvorak pick? I'm like, look, I hated it at the time, and that turned into the number 1 overall pick. Meaning, as per usual, the AZ Sports guy, though handsome and smug he may be, was correct. That was a stupid idea. I didn't even expect Montreal to be bad last year. I just didn't like the risk. I thought it was a stupid gamble, and it didn't pay off. I guess a handful of gambles for the Coyotes didn't pay off around that time. But If you do not put a protection on it, we'll take whatever bad contract you want. Don't be Philadelphia. Don't lose out on the ability to sign a high-profile player just because you didn't want to throw in a first-round draft pick. Because if you're expecting to be good, a first-round pick this year means nothing. If you think you're going to be bad, then that first-round pick means something. If you're not sure, well, maybe you're not very good at your job.
Yeah. I mean, it happens, right? Like, ever since the Senators fleeced San Jose with that Carlson trade by getting them to leave unprotections on that pick, and then I think it was Tucson that they got with that pick, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, ever since that, like, GMs have, like, been gun shy about leaving picks unprotected.
Man, I would be gun shy about taking your bad contracts. That's me, though.
I mean, it's just like, I mean, look at Colorado, right? Like, Colorado won the Stanley Cup this year, and before the season started, even they had pick protection. Like, it's just unfortunately the way it is now.
It's also why you need an equal amount of hardball on this side to be like, okay, then you're not getting the cap space. Okay, then you're not getting this. Okay, then, well, you're not getting the goaltender that helped lead you to the Stanley Cup Finals. Just saying. That's the way I look at it. Be as hardball as you possibly can for as long as possible, because if GMs can't have it both ways forever, you can have it both ways for 2 years, 3 months, 12 trades in a row, whatever. But you can't have it your way forever. So it's like at some point you got to give, and if you, especially with the cap space is going to go up hopefully in 2 years. Meaning until then, your cap space is such a valuable asset, weaponize it. Be like, hey, I'm not taking anything unless you give me an unprotected first. Oh, you don't want to give me that? Well, then I guess you're not getting the cap space to get this player. And then you just hang up the phone. You just say, nope, click. And then if they really want that player, they'll call you back. If they don't, I guess that team's not going to be very good, are they?
Yeah, I mean, when you want to talk about not making the call, right? Like, Chuck Fletcher in Philadelphia might honestly be on his way out because he didn't make that call to Arizona. Like, obviously, Gaudreau's first place that he'd want to go would be Philly, right? Because, like, that's who he grew up watching. That's who he'd want to be. He even said, I think in the Spit and Chicklets podcast, like, you know, he was pretty much, like, fully prepared to go to Philly, but they never really, like, offered him anything. Which is, like, a really big yikes when you have such a big hole offensively there in Philly. Like, why do you not make that trade? Why, like, if I could tell you, I'll trade you James Van Riemsdyk and our first for Johnny Gaudreau, would you not take that? Like, that's a pretty damn good trade, and he didn't do it. Like, I get that, like, maybe you're struggling and maybe you're not confident in your team, but, like, if you're not confident in your team, then why were you making all those trades last season to, like, do some big wheeling and dealing, right? Like, he made massive wheel and dealing moves. Last year they thought they were better than
they were. That's the only thing that makes sense. And it's like, oh, well, I miscalculated last year, so I should do nothing this year.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, congratulations, you're just going to be stuck in purgatory. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. Like, and it's not like, oh, you know, what if we ended up with the top 3 pick? Well, congratulations, as Matt and I were just talking about. Every single pick now that's in the first round that gets moved apparently has freaking protections on it. So just slap on a Band-Aid right onto the wall of that one. Slap a top 3 protection, and there you go.
Then again, Philly fans totally deserve mediocrity. They are garbage. That is an AZ Sports Guy definitive stamp of approval. I will trash talk Philadelphia whenever I get the opportunity. The only thing good about your city is it's always sunny. That's it.
True. Yeah. Pennsylvania.
Anyway.
Pennsylvania as a whole is a pretty trash state.
Hey!
We got
So it's a little too close to where all that little crap is up there, the stuff that we don't like.
We got Pittsburgh on the other side of that state, and let's just say there's a reason that ain't nobody want to live in Pittsburgh.
Let's just say that when I played the Pit DLC in Fallout 3, it actually I felt like that's what it looks like now. You can just go there anytime.
The most the most underrated DLC because it was actually just real life.
It was just them filming the actual
all the blood sports and stuff. Yeah, that's actually just real life. Like
having like mutant troglodytes or whatever that are jumping around in the darkness. We should stop before we actually say something that's stupid. Anyway, anything else generic, or do you want to get right into the Coyotes?
I think we get right into the Coyotes because, yeah, I mean, I think we put enough of our 2 cents on that trade. I know a lot of Coyotes fans, just Coyotes related, I guess, with the Matthew Tkachuk trade. I know a lot of fans, including yourself, were really hoping for that one, saying we could have a Doan and Tkachuk line again. Mm-hmm. As fun as it does sound, I agreed in the sense that it probably doesn't make the most sense for our build. Like, we want to be bad next year so that we can get Bedard, and picking Matthews up. I don't know why I keep saying Matthews. I'm thinking of Austin Matthews because of the other
we're gonna get
the
both
other stuff
Austin
online.
And we're gonna get Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk just doesn't make sense. Like, he would have made us a much better team next year, which is what we do not want. So yeah.
Well, I just think theoretically, like, here was my mindset behind it, is that we wouldn't have to give up the rebuild if we just added Tkachuk. It would be one of those things where we're adding Tkachuk to be a part of it, like we're building around him and Keller, for example. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that was my mindset behind it. Obviously, it depends on who you're giving up. That would probably be the biggest like downer to whatever rebuild, depending on what assets. But I was just looking at it from the perspective of, it would be cool to have like a Tkachuk and a Doan on the same line and to build around that. Like, that is your core. Yeah. And then when they're all in their prime. But, yeah, what was it, 2 years or 1 year left on that deal? He likely wouldn't have been happy coming here right now, so we couldn't even guarantee he would sign an extension. So it's one of those things where it's like, it was a fun few days on Twitter. It was something that I'm keeping that idea out there regardless, because if things don't work out in Florida, well, things are going to start not working out right around the time when things start working out here. So I am just saying that never lose hope to get a Tkachuk and a Donor, but realistically, you're going to have to wait another decade. I don't think you're going to have to wait a decade.
I don't think you're moving Brady at all. I think Brady's going to stay as a Senator for a long time. But I do agree with you. Like, if the wheels fall out on this Panthers team, like, there's nothing saying that Matt can't get, moved a few years from now.
But that was my mindset behind it, is you wouldn't necessarily have to give up the rebuild, but he probably does make that first line even more electric, and the amount of games that we were losing by 1 or 2 goals, especially towards the end of the year, that starts turning into 3, 4, 5, up to 10 more wins because of how many games stayed close. Yeah. And yeah, that probably puts you into mediocrity. But my mindset behind it was, if you give up maybe some of the bottom 6 depth as well in a trade, and it's like, hey, you're very top heavy. You're pretty much what Colorado was when they beat us in the playoffs. Your first line, maybe your second line, that's about it. So you're beatable. But if it still makes that much of a difference, like, it probably wouldn't have been a good idea. I just like to hold on to hope we can get a Tkachuk and a Donor.
Mm-hmm. I will say, are you ready for some crazy beans that I was thinking of last night? I was dreaming about this.
Actually. All right.
Okay, so you know how a year or two back, we had Taylor Hall went to Buffalo on a 1-year deal. I thought it was a really good idea for Taylor because he could go to Buffalo, play in Buffalo, have some fun, try to play with Jack Eichel. Obviously didn't work out. And then I'm assuming in his thought process is like, at the deadline I could probably be moved to a cup contender. I think a lot of players are starting to realize that they can do that. Hey, I'm going to purposely sign for a bad team, go be good on this bad team, and then instead of picking one of the better teams to go play for in the off season, and just fingers crossed that it doesn't fall out. I want to get to the playoffs, right? You purposely go to a bad team, play there till the deadline, and then get traded to a good team where you're more likely to go play in the playoffs, right? Because then you know, like, oh, this team's a wagon, you know, and I'm getting traded to them. Like, oh, okay, great. What if GM Bill Armstrong puts out a deal for Nazem Kadri for like 9.5 to 10 mil to come to the Coyotes, and then at the deadline, he 50% retains on Kadri so that he's 5 mil.
Well, do you remember that? I forget who said it, but do you remember that one like Twitter account that, or it might have been like an actual journo on there was like, oh, Kadri like could get an offer from Arizona. That was a stupid like rumor because it was like a multi-year. But
Yeah.
when you put it into that context, Kadri said he only wants to sign with a contender. 90% of the contenders, where's their cap space?
Yep.
So it's one of those things where, I mean, also you might be seeing that. I haven't personally noticed that aspect of, oh, I can sign with a bad team and get traded. But when you package it like that, when you're like, hey, you know, you can actually see what teams are good, increasing your likelihood to make the playoffs, you know, when that time comes.
Yep.
I can see that working. I don't want Kadri on the Coyotes. I don't like Kadri's game. He won't, you know, people like him, whatever, cool. I think he's a dirty player, so I'm not a big fan. I wouldn't even want him on here for that because I have a feeling that with our luck, getting a guy like Kadri, the wheels would fall out and we would get no value for him.
Yeah, I mean, you'd only sign him to like a 1-year deal.
Yeah, it would only be a 1 year, but if you're stuck with him for the year and you can't get anything for him, it essentially, not quite as bad, but it becomes Dmitry Yaskin. Like, so that's why I'm just, me personally, that's a good idea. It's a good concept. Who else is available on free agency that we could try that with? Kadri is just a name that I don't want to be anywhere near.
I know Subban's still out there. I doubt Subban, the wheels have really fallen off, unfortunately. Which definitely
sucks. I wouldn't mind having him here for like some community stuff and some jersey sales because honestly, he's a really good guy in the community. Big
he
fan
is.
of PK.
Yeah, I am a big fan of PK as well. And honestly, like if you want to talk about a guy who can keep the rookies out, you know, he would work. But the problem is that the Coyotes have so many defensemen right now, like it's not even funny. So I don't see that really being a thing.
Maybe he goes back to Montreal. Maybe they can right that wrong.
I've heard people say that, and you know, I think it could happen, right? Because he still loves Montreal. Like he still visits all the time. I think he still has a house there. He still has the children's wing, which he put a lot of money into. I think he donated over like $1 million to this hospital to put another like child wing on, and they called the wing, you know, the Subban wing or whatever. Like he really does care about that community, and he really cares about Montreal. I mean, I could see it. You know, you don't have the previous general manager there anymore, so there's not nearly as much bad blood. You don't have the same coach. The only thing that's the same would be a few players, right? And then the owner. So we don't know what the owner said about PK in the past or anything like that. You know, so if we could presume that everything was left on a pretty good term, which I think it was. I don't remember there being bad blood with the trade. It was just kind of one of those things where it was like, all right, we need to move on. It makes a lot of sense of why not.
Because they're supposed to be bad, so they don't need PK to be as electrifying as he was. I think I recall like reading or hearing that it was some bad blood between like the coach and him, and or the GM and coach and him. So it's one of those things where those are probably the biggest two pieces that now that they're gone, makes a lot more sense for PK to potentially go back. But it would be really good. Cynical for a second, it'd be really good PR. It'd also be really good for mending fences with one of. Obviously, he's not going to be like a top 10 great in their franchise or anything, but he was an electrifying player for a long time, and he was someone that I think it would be really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And screw it. Said we'll bring Phil Kessel back because obviously nobody wants to sign him. We'll give him $1 million for the year.
I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Phil, because that's an interesting one with me. I think that the Coyotes do actually like Phil quite a bit, like as a room guy. Like, I think like, if you want to talk about good guy awards, like, people like to harp on Phil for being, oh, he's not much of a team player, he doesn't put as much effort in. Like, I think the guys in the locker room really like him and respect him. And that's one of those things where, like, if it's going to be another long off season, or sorry, not off season, a long just regular season, I mean, if nobody's picking Phil up, right? Does he come back to Arizona? Hey, we'll give you time. You want that Iron Man streak to continue? We got nothing going on, right? So I don't know. I really don't know. It's interesting though. Like, so many people wanted to pound on him for being, you know, falling back offensively, but when you look, what was Phil's greatest asset? It was his shot, right? But he didn't really have very many goals this year. But then you look at the assist category, he still has the hands. Like, he had 44 assists, and when you watched him, like, he could still make some really good passes. He played really well with Lawson Crouse.
It's one of those things where it's like, I stand by all the criticism I've ever given him, where it's like he definitely wasn't a team player in the context of you're hurt, why are you eating up a roster spot and being a liability, you know, this or that. But I'm a critic. I'm a you know, amateur reporter, whatever. I'm a critic. If the guys in the locker room like him, and you're making a decision from a hockey perspective, and you want that locker room to be everyone's nice and close, you want good morale, yeah. What does it matter what someone like me thinks? Like, genuinely, like, I mean, what does it matter what I think in general? But I mean, if he can provide some sort of value to that context, I say do it. I say a 1 year. Screw it, give him 2.5 because, you know, veteran will give you a little more, whatever, and then it's just, hey, it's easier to move on from 2.5 or retain, and you're moving a $1.25 million contract. It's easier to do that than it was, what was his cap hit, 8 or 7 million last year, whatever it was, so it was harder to get rid of him.
Yeah, I think it was 8 million.
So it's just, look, I said it, I know you said you didn't think there was value to it. I'm like, look, I don't know who else is going to be able to guarantee him ice time. I don't know who else wants to deal with the Philadelphia Keith Yandel thing. So I'm like, I think it makes sense to bring him back next year. Then again, I'm also the kind of person, I'm like, hey, you want to get some butts and seats? Bring Keith Yandel back too? Screw it. Look, I'm a big proponent for bringing the band. If we're not building anything, like that season, obviously we want to get some rookies in there, we want to get some more time, but if we know we're not going to be good, like, what would it have hurt to bring back McHale for a year? What would it have hurt to bring back Jans or to bring back, you know, Laurent Dauphin? He's back now. Like, what would it hurt to have a little bit of fanfare and just do something that's like for the fans, for the whatever? Like, I don't see that hurting. It hurts when you're trying to push for a playoff spot and you're like, hey, Keith Yandel's a defensive liability. Well, the fans like him, so we'll keep him. Like, no, we're not at that point, so why not have a little fun with it?
Yeah, I mean, it insulates a rookie from being in that losing atmosphere, right? Because that's the biggest worry when you're tanking like this, and this is why it has always consistently been a problem. Perfect example is Buffalo. I know we use them as an example too much, but we do. You know, you tank intentionally to be bad to get good players, and they did that. They absolutely did that. They tanked intentionally to get good players, and they got good players. The problem is that those young kids who came in during those tank seasons only knew how to lose. They didn't have the drive or that anger to you know, want to win every game, because they were so used to being, oh, we lost. Oh well. Yes.
And then just to add into that, I didn't want to just jump in. Because even if they have that to start, you can only take so much losing before, even if it's not voluntary, part of you stops caring. Yep. And the second you do that and it seeps into the core, It's like that's why I really liked what they did last year, and I really liked how it bothered them to go winless in the first, what was it, 11, 13, whatever. It bothered them to be a bottom 5 team. You could tell these guys were trying every single night, and that's the atmosphere you need to create, because obviously you can only lose so much before the bottom falls out, before some guys just kind of lose the drive, which is also why it's like, bring in guys that have motivation. Hey, I can get traded to a better team. Hey, this is one of my last shots at getting an NHL contract. I want to show that I can still be in the league. Look what, Strawman, I think he played well. All things considered, I wouldn't even mind if he came back for one more year. I don't think he does. I think he probably ends up retiring, but I'm just saying, you want to bring that in because you want as much drive to win as possible. And even if you have to kind of I feel like they didn't patch it together optimally, because it's hard. It's not just, hey, like a video game, you can just throw these guys in here, but it's just, you have to find the right combination of everything, and also building that culture of winning from the AHL. You want guys going to the AHL competing in the playoffs, knowing what it's like to prepare for playoff hockey, knowing what it's like to hey, this is how we win. Even though it's at a lower level, they're used to winning.
Yep.
Give them to the NHL, you get a locker room that's like, I want to win. We're a bottom 5 team. I still want to win. I'm going out there 110% every night. That's culture.
Yeah.
That is what you need to build, and it's really, really easy to mess that up. Like the hockey guy, I think he said it very well when he's like, it's always easy to tear down. It's actually kind of fun to tear down. It's just, hey, tear it up, blow it up. This guy's going here, all these assets. How do you build it back up?
Yep.
That is the hardest part in any league, but especially the hockey.
Yep.
It's a culture thing and a drive thing, really, like personnel.
Well, the interesting part is it's not just like a simple plan, right? You have a lot of moving pieces that you also have to think about on the back end. So we mentioned one, which was that drive of winning in players. You can't bring a young player into a losing team because they become demotivated, and you can really sour their expectations and their projections for being good players because of it. The other one being the coach's message, right? If you have a coach, and this is what the Coyotes did last year, they played their ass off for their coach. They didn't have the skill to win those games, but they played their asses off. If you watch those games, they tried. They tried their best, but it was just, they just didn't have that skill there. And the biggest worry with that is that message is only heard for so long, right? If you've got guys who are on multi-year contracts with the Coyotes, like Keller, Crouse, all the other young kids in the lineup, Hayton, all those young guys, and they're hearing this message from Tournier, and he keeps repeating that message year after year. Eventually that message isn't going to be heard. It's not going to be as powerful. And that is also dangerous, because once you're finally good, you have a problem of these more veteran players who've been on the team for a long time stop giving a crap about what the coach has to say. And that's not a good thing either.
The best way is pretty much try to find this balance, because that's a very good point. I also think depending on, that might not be that big of a deal. So when you're not seeing progress, when you're not seeing it, you're not getting closer in the standings, you're not building your way up, players are going to look at you. At some point, they're going to be like, you've been saying this for 3 years, we're still bottom 3. You've been saying this for 5 years, we aren't even in a wild card spot yet. But if you can get these guys, and the message is consistent, and there's growth. Hey, we were bottom 3 this year, let's go for bottom 6, whatever. Try to go up in the standings, keep yourself at some sort of forward progression. It's look, I know I'm an optimist, we're not getting Connor Bedard. Prove me wrong. Universe, look at me, prove me wrong. But what I'm saying is, I'd rather, hey, we have all these good young players, these assets, let's start building up. We're gonna have more assets regardless in the future, trading guys off, having all the picks we've gotten. We can use those seconds to get back in the first. We can get those seconds in the first to get higher in the draft. We're going to have that. We're making really good moves with that. But on the ice, I want to see progress. I want to see 5 more wins this year. I want to see a couple spots higher in the standings. And if players see that and they see we're going upwards, that message becomes easier or at least more logical to buy into because we're seeing the fruits of the labor. Even if it doesn't feel like we are, there's a noticeable uptick. So it's like you have to. Everything is a balance. Nothing is an exact science. Nothing is a, hey, this is exactly what you do and it's going to be successful 102% of the time. Like, no, it's a fine line that the second that coach's message stops being heard, you either have to trade half of your roster to just get a bunch of new guys in that might buy into it, or you have to replace the coach.
Yep.
And we do not want to hit that point. I love Andre Turgeon. I think he's been phenomenal with these young players. I think he did a great job last year. Oh, how many games did they win? They weren't supposed to win the cup last year. We all knew that, and now we got Logan Cooley. The fruits of our labor starting to be seen. Now, okay, what's the next step? I know everybody wants Bedard. Everybody wants another bottom three finish, whatever. Like I said, I don't know if I'm just used to disappointment. I don't know if it's just because we never won a draft lottery. It's like, I don't see us getting Bedard. So, my focus is, okay, are we a little higher in the standings? Did we move up a couple of spots? Did we get, 5 or so extra wins? Did Vamelka look better? Was the defense, starting to tighten up a bit? All these rookies, that raw talent, is it starting to become more defined? The offense, is it producing more consistently? Yeah, we're still going to be bottom 10 in scoring. Okay, but can we get those numbers up from where they were last year? Will they be a little more efficient? Can we get another half a goal per game, on average? That's what I'm looking at. Just stuff like that to show some improvement.
Yeah. I agree with you completely. There was a point that I was saving in my head. So I'm gonna come back. I'm sorry, I don't mean to derail what you were talking about.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I thought of a pretty good way to think about it when we were talking about players getting demotivated and then also coaches' messages not being heard. So a good example of this is you have two options as a coach, right? You can come in yelling, screaming, kicking cans, stuff like that, and that's your message getting heard, right? That is a player that feeling there is a player of hating losing, right? Is when they see their coach doing that. Then you have the other side of the coach, which is over here, which is the bad game, bundle it up, throw it in the trash, let's not think about it, on to the next one, right? And what that is that's leading to a mindset of a player not caring, right? Because if the coach doesn't care, then the player's not going to care, and they're not going to feel that pressure of losing. So it's one of those tippy toes that path that you constantly have to go down, where you do have to be fired up some nights. I feel like when it's a close game and if you blow it, you should probably be a little fired up as a coach. But then if you're getting blown out, 7-1 or whatever, that's a game that you throw away in the trash. So it's a fine line that you kind of have to keep weaving your way through consistently. And I don't know where I'm going with that. I was thinking about it in my head. I'm like, actually, that's kind of a good way of thinking about it, like that.
I got something real quick. I'm like, for that, I actually think on some of the nights you're blown out, especially if you weren't just outplayed, if it's something like you're going against the Colorado Avalanche, you lose 6-1 or something. It's like, look, that sucks. They're the cup fight, they're the cup winner. Just crumple it up, throw that one in the trash. What more could you really do?
Yep.
But if you are getting blown out and it's a team that you should be competing with, or it's a team that, let's call them a wild card team, a team that, 2 more losses and they're a mediocre team on the outside of the playoffs, I'm looking at you where the F was your effort? Something like that, you need to be fired up. If it's a close game, also depends on context. If it's close, you were up 3-1, you blew a lead, and that's why it was close, I'm going in there, I'm going full Keith Tkachuk, kicking, screaming, punching a hole in the wall or something. If that happens, I'm like, where did your what happened? Where did your drive to win go? But if you're down 3-1, you push it to overtime. I'm like, look, that was a hell of an effort. So it's but at the same time, like you said, it's bobbing and weaving. It's a balancing act. You're on a tightrope in between two large buildings. You have to find out what's the best possible route, because some guys might take hey, it was a good effort, and be like, yeah, but it wasn't good enough, and then you might sour there. Some guys might take you throwing away a 7-1 loss and being like, okay, so the coach doesn't care if we get blown out. It's such a tightrope that it's like
Yeah.
I don't know how coaches do it. Like when we actually sit here and we force ourselves to think about these different perspectives and the different is minutia the proper word? The different details of being a coach and balancing a locker room, it makes it a lot more impressive when guys make it look easy. Honestly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed. I had another point, but then they started talking and I forgot. There was a second point I was trying to keep up here, and the second I started talking, I forgot. So I'm just gonna start dancing. No.
I was about to say, did you pull a Keith Yandel? You go across the blue line, you lost, like you hit a reset.
Oh, okay. I remember. I just looked at our page so that I could pull. I'm pulling out the hot takes here.
All right, fire it.
Barrett Hayton was not drafted by GMBA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know historically that general managers, when they have players that they did not draft, they will trade them away.
Dylan Strom.
Well, yes, that is true. But is there a worry that if Barrett Hayton doesn't step it up this upcoming year, that he could find himself being moved on by the Coyotes?
Well, he's an RFA currently, isn't he? Like they still haven't given him his 1 year extension.
I believe they've qualified him, but I don't know if he has arbitration rights.
I know Crouse does. We can talk about that in a second because that could be disastrous. All right, and I will go doomer on that one. I think that's fair. But we'll get to that in a second. But with Hayton, I think he's still an RFA. It's one of those things where me and you have talked. I still don't mind that EA NHL multi-year contract. Prove it. But at the same time, if you're a BA, you're like, do I want to take this risk with this cap hit and contract on this guy? Especially, look how casually me and you have been saying, yeah, two-way center, slots it as a third liner. What if BA is not satisfied with that? What if he's looking at that like, if that's where he projects, what's the point? Logically, because, I like having younger players, mainly because fresher legs, usually a little faster. It's something that it usually leads to also a little more durability. Depending on, it's a balancing act. Some guys, shorter seasons in the juniors or whatever, they come in and they can't quite keep up with all 82. But also when you're younger, you have the easier ability to bounce back than a 38-year-old. But if we're building up, he might look at it like, we'll just go get a veteran center to play third line, and he can also help teach the younger kids. So, like, there is an actual, especially since he hasn't been signed yet, and to my knowledge, there hasn't really been any good reports of any contract talks, even any, like, trade rumors. There hasn't been anything with Barrett. And the thing is, he's been getting better, but if we are accepting he projects as a third line, and internally they are accepting that, this is hypothetical, we have no sources, we are just throwing stuff out here. If that's what's going on, it's entirely possible they just don't sign him. They trade away his rights. They give him a 1 year, and like the next year don't qualify him. Cause I think they qualified him this year because obviously that's what you do. He's a 5th overall pick, but if it's 1 year further out and they still, because he didn't sign the qualifying, did he? You just have to extend it in order to keep his rights. You don't have to.
Yes, you just have to send them a piece of paper, right? And then as long as you've sent that piece of paper, they don't walk to free agency. A good example of this is ask Chicago how that went, because they did that. Oops. Yeah, they were in the middle of switching general managers. I think this was after their first cup win, and there were like 2 or 3 RFAs that they didn't send a qualifying offer to, so they went to UFA and just walked for free. I believe Dustin Byfuglien was one of those guys. I believe. It's been a while.
We just saw with Dylan Strome. They're like, we're not going to extend you a qualifying offer. He went 1 year to Washington. I still stand by the Coyotes should have made a pull at him. I know you. I don't know if you. I think you said you disagreed at the draft party. You can correct me, but it's like.
I like the idea of trying to bring him back. I just don't think as a UFA, since he got to choose where he wanted to go, I don't think he wanted to come back. The fan base treated him poorly. Management didn't really give him a good, or not management, but I should say the coach didn't really give him a good opportunity. I know the coach is different now, but still, like, I feel like that's when you're a UFA like that, you go, why would I come back? Like, you guys were dicks to me. Like, you know.
But I think it's also because what option, like, from everything that was being reported, obviously, I'm not friends with Dylan. He wasn't like, hey, Matt, here are the 3 teams that offered me a contract. But just from everything that was being reported, there wasn't a whole lot of interest. There wasn't a whole lot of guys, putting their or teams putting an offer out there. That's why I was like, look, this might be a great opportunity to be like, hey, we're changing the culture here. We have a top 6 spot for you. You sign him to a 2 or 3 year contract. You can flip him, or when the team starts getting good, if he's not playing well enough, you can just let him walk in free agency. Like, that was my mindset behind it. And it's like, I think Washington gets a very good value player because they need the extra center depth right now. I think their first line center is out for however long. They're not going to replace him. So
Backstrom's going to be out for the entire...
So he could play with Ovechkin.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is, Backstrom being out for the entire regular season. He can come back, I believe, during the playoffs, but out for the regular season, you're going to have that option to be playing with Alex Ovechkin. And let's be real here. Even though Dylan Strome ain't the fastest skater, he has unreal hockey sense and passing. His shot's pretty below average, but his passing is really good. And you don't need to shoot the puck when you got Alex Ovechkin sitting in the circle, hammering that one-timer over and over and over. So,
if anything, it's a very smart, calculated contract by him, because let's just say there were 6 teams. Pick any teams. It could be... Colorado could be one because, hey, we need more center depth, and for cheaper, sure, let's just say Colorado. Throw out a Pacific Division team, throw out a couple bottom feeders and a couple mediocre teams. He's looking at it like, he's probably, asterisk there, looking at it like, I can go play with Ovechkin, I'm going to get my point totals up, I'm going to look really good for a year, I'm going to be able to get all that interest back, and I'm going to be able to get a really good contract.
Yep.
And I don't care where he goes after that. You cannot fault the man for that mindset, because while the top 6 minutes are there in Arizona, 100%, and he could lead a line and play very well, playing with Keller, play with whoever, he could do that. He could also go play with the greatest goal scorer we've ever seen and make himself look even better.
Yeah.
Like, who are you going to pick?
Yeah, you put up 60, 65 assists, right, in Washington. That's a damn good season for you, and they're not terrible, right? They also picked up Darcy Kemper in goal. I do have my worries about Darcy. Having an eye injury is a very scary thing. I hope that he fully recovers from that. We've seen it firsthand here with Grabner, right? Like, I love Grabner, and I still respected the hell out of that guy, even coming back and battling through his injury. But eye injuries are a scary thing. They're permanent sometimes, and I really hope that Darcy can find that competitive game back after a serious injury like he had.
I mean, also just from the Capitals' perspective, because I've ever since Ovechkin, I've kind of just been like, I like the Capitals. I didn't mind them winning the Cup in 2018, but it's like,
yeah,
he wanted that big contract, and we already said, I said, go get that contract somewhere else, but it's like, I don't think he lives up to it. Maybe for 2 years. Maybe. And it's like, look, he still got it. Good for him, but it's one of those things where I think they definitely looked at Kemper winning a cup and said, we'll take that goaltender as opposed to who actually was the best goalie available. They're probably like, hey, the Coyotes traded him and he wins a cup. Maybe if we sign him, we'll also get a cup.
All I'll say, Darcy to the desert, 2024. with a second round pick. 2 seconds.
Be the backup for Karel Vejmelka.
That's the asking price. 2 seconds. Which is crazy if you think about it. So Bill Armstrong has been moving seconds to move up in the draft. Picking up 2 seconds in a trade is effectively like a late first. Like, he just trades them away. He's just like, I'll take your 2 seconds and then I'll just move them up into the first. Like, it's crazy.
This big 6'7" giant defenseman. You can have a couple of my. We have all the seconds in the world. You could just have them.
Yeah. To circle back on the wagon here, Barrett Hayton. I am curious to see how he plays this year. I think he will get a lot of ice time. If if your projections are him being third line center, and it doesn't work out for him being on the team, the other option that I had on the third line would have been Travis Boyd. I think he's shown that he can be an NHLer, right? Because
but do you want to break him up from Keller and Schmaltz with how ridiculous they play? Obviously, it might be a flash in the pan thing, but it's just that chemistry was unreal last year.
It was really good chemistry, and I am curious to see how that looks. We don't really have a centerman on this team that's going, you are the guy. So it really is going to be, there's actually 4 main players, I would say, that are going to be playing for that first line center position, which is Boyd, Hayton, McBain, and Nathan Smith. We didn't really, I know it was a real short stint at the end of the season, but I really do think that Nathan Smith and McBain could be seeing top 6 time next year.
Especially
I really
McBain.
do believe it. Mm-hmm.
I know it was a prospect game. All right, I know I have to calm down, and I know I have to nail in that context.
Yeah.
But he was a man among children. It was a prospect game, and I saw him pissed off. I saw him angry that the drives weren't working out right, or puck kept getting turned over. Like, he had a drive to win in a prospect game, and he already has an NHL job. Like, yeah. I know this is just us talking, but when we were talking about, hey, what does these, Geeky and Cooley coming in do for a guy like McBain? And I was saying I think he's going to get fired up. Look, it's too early to say definitively. I think we're already seeing signs that a guy like that has that fiery competitiveness in him. He might steal the first line spot. He's not going to be first line when Cooley comes in, but this year, because Cooley's at least a couple years away, optimistically 2 years away, might be another year or so after that, but McBain might steal that.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to watch him play. He does those little things right, and it's again, you can't teach competitiveness. You can try, but man, if someone doesn't have that fire, you can't do anything with it. And Smith didn't play in that game, so I can't really say much for him except for what we saw last year was pretty good. Although I think he ends up moving to the wing. I have nothing to base that off except for I just feel like he probably ends up just drifting over to the wing. It's kind of a gut thing.
I didn't get to enough sample size from him to say that. I do agree with your opinion. Like I do think that McBain looks better in the center position than Smith does. But at the same time, we didn't get enough sample size for me to really make that total stamp of like this is what's going to be. Yeah, I am curious. I hope that those 2 kids get some opportunity to move up to the first line and play with Keller and Schmaltz this year. I really do hope so, because they came here looking for more opportunity, and luckily, like, Tournier's shown that he says, like, hey, you play good, you're getting that opportunity, right? Doesn't matter if you're Christian Fischer or Clayton Keller. Like, if you play good, you're getting that opportunity. So I hope that one of them can hop up there and maybe take that first line position from Boyd. But we'll see. I mean, if they don't, then maybe they're your second line, right? Like, what if you got a second line of McBain down the middle? So just to go back here. So your first line would be Schmaltz, Boyd, Keller. Your second line would be maybe Smith on the wing, McBain in the middle, and then you'd have like Richie on the right, or Lawson, Crouse, right? One or the other. They're both kind of similar players. I'd say Crouse is more skill, whereas Richie's more bully over. But something like that would be all right for a top 6, I would say.
And I definitely say that I have to agree. Like, it was too small of a sample size. I just have a gut feeling. That's the only thing I'm basing it on. And your gut feeling could be wrong, but that's why it's like I just feel like he goes over to the wing. But I would not mind McBain at center, Smith on the wing. You could throw Krauser out there, see how he plays with them. But I want to see Machelli play with them. I want to see them as I want to see Michelli get a stint in the AHL first. Kind of get his confidence back up a bit and show improvement on those areas that he needed to work on last year. And then I want to see him play with McBain and Smith in the top six and just see where he's at. But throwing Crouse there, I think Richie works best in the bottom six, only because of that bull you over kind of play set, and also the fact that Krauser is now a 20-goal scorer. You need to run with that while the iron's hot.
Yeah, I mean, you also have Bjugstad and Cassian, right? Cassian's probably your fourth line guy, but Bjugstad's definitely can be a third line center as well. Like, we're missing Hayton out of that piece. I think we made the argument that Bjugstad listed as a winger means that he's probably more of a winger than a center. So maybe you put Hayton on the third line with Bjugstad and Richie. Right?
That could be
you got the skilled centerman to drive play through the middle, because let's not kid ourselves, like Hayton does have skill. Like he's not skillless. Like he's got good hands, he's got good vision. The problem is that he just hasn't been able to capitalize. And maybe we've seen him be put on skilled lines. Like he was centering Crouse and Kessel, right, for quite a bit of time. That's some pretty big skill. And if he can't work with those skill players, maybe he does need more physical players, guys who drive the net, guys who will just blow through you. And I mean, Bjugstad's not a little guy. Bjugstad's like 6'6" or something like that. He's a big body. And then you have Richie, who's also another big body. And Richie knows how to score. Like he can shoot the puck. So if you've got the skilled winger the skilled centerman down the middle, and he's just tapping off free backdoor passes to Richie or shooting for the pad for rebounders for Richie, and then Bjugstad's just blowing people up in the corner, it could work out. It makes a lot of sense.
I think one thing especially is just if they can manage to get Hayton in on the idea of controlled entry. Hey, you have two big beefcakes on either side of you. Take it across the line. Mm-hmm. If you want to play with it for a little bit, kind of in between the circles, sure, try to loosen the goalie up a bit, give your wingers time to get to the net. Just start firing pucks, because you might be able to get a moving screen. You might be able to get Richie right there for a rebound. You might be able to bounce it off a couple guys.
Crash the net.
And just, I think that could be interesting, because for the most part, I don't remember him doing a lot of dump and chase, but I do remember him carrying it across the line quite a bit. I just don't remember what he did after when I was watching it a lot of the time. So I know you pay a lot more attention to the little stuff like that, so you could fill me in real quick.
Yeah, so there's a couple of plays that I really liked from Barrett Hayton. His first year, he had a really good play. Obviously this was a few years back, but he had a really good play in the bringing it over the line, and then he kind of just did a little move, like I think it was between the defender's legs, and then kind of freed himself up to get into a shooting lane and scored. That was a really good highlight from him. Obviously, we saw the big highlight where he walked his way through 3 or 4 defenders and scored on the goalie. That was another. That was a good zone entry. What I do like is a play that kind of comes up in my head, because I was sitting there in the seat and got to see this firsthand, was that he's always looking at the goalie and seeing where the goalie's eyes are. So there's a play, I believe also his first year, he was playing with Phil Kessel, and he starts skating behind the net, and I think the puck's down there, and he's going to grab it, and he's watching the goalie's eyes as he's skating towards the puck, and he gets the puck first and turns, and I think he passes it between his legs, or some little quick pass straight to Kessel, who's sitting right on the slice of the trapezoid, and Kessel beams it right into the corner, and the goalie had no clue that it was even coming. Those are the types of things that you got to do to be an everyday NHLer, and that's what I want to see more of out of Hayton. When he got sent down and brought up, he was doing a lot of that stuff. He was doing a lot of paying attention, looking where people's eyes are, a lot of want and effort. I remember when he got sent down, came back up, it was either game 3 or game 4, where he had that unreal effort where he dug out the puck from a defense, he poked there's a defenseman in the trapezoid with the puck. He like poked it into the corner, dug it out, and then just drove the net and scored. Right? That was a great individual effort as well. I do like the individual efforts. I want to see more of the team play aspect of it. I do think that he can be better with making passes. He doesn't use a lot of slingshot passes, which I think they should absolutely do with him because he has a lot of speed. Like defenseman up the boards, and then the winger passes it to the centerman, slingshotting him into from the neutral zone to the offensive zone. They did it once, and he got an unreal highlight goal, but they need to do it more often.
I wouldn't even mind, honestly, even just for the first 5 or so games, just commit to it. Have him be the first line center. Have him play between Keller and Schmaltz. Yeah. Like, hey, Boyd, you're going to get your minutes. Obviously, he'll play third line maybe, but it's just, hey, we want to see what Hayton can do. No pressure of, hey, you're going to get bumped down the next game. Just do your thing and see what you can do with Keller and Schmaltz, because you take that same basic mindset. Keller's fast. He is a speedy wing. I think Schmaltz isn't quite as fast, but he still has some speed to him. So if you control entry, he wouldn't have to do that much playing around with the puck between the circles before you have someone open for a passing lane. Before, Schmaltzy, he probably can just shoot for the low glove side and see if Schmaltzy can put home a rebound. But you're also leaving a wide open lane on your left side where Clayton Keller, your speedy wing, you can do like a backhand pass to him, so you're looking one way, trying to fake him out. There's some things you could do depending on like what his supporting cast is, and I do want them to re-sign him at least for 2 years. I'm like, hey, have him under control for 2 years. If he doesn't work out, trade him next offseason. But I want to see what he can do, because we're seeing progress. It's just obviously kind of like with Stromer, it's not enough for the 5th overall. It's not enough for like Strome. He was criticized a lot because he's a 3rd overall pick, even though he did a lot of the little things right. But your brain doesn't care when you keep comparing, oh, well, who else was taken 3rd, who else was taken 5th? Like, your brain keeps expecting that. Yeah. So you're looking at it like, it's easy for you to just push it off to the side. Like, not you specifically, just people in general. It's easy to do that.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about something that isn't easy to do. I am phenomenal with segues. Last topic that I can think of, Crouser. Crouser is going to arbitration. I know they said that was the next thing they were working on was a Crouse contract, I think at the end of the season. And I brought it up last time, and probably 2 podcasts ago, and it is concerning. Now that we're going to arbitration, it is more concerning, because now, does this become a situation where, does Crouse want to leave? Is it a situation where he feels lowballed? Is it a situation where he wants more term? What specifically is going on? Because I haven't seen any detailed reports of how negotiations were going, or even that they were going at all. I know he was on that vacation for his engagement, but besides that, and then you go to arbitration, guys do not want to go to arbitration. They elect it so you can kind of put some pressure to get a decent contract signed. Because when you go to arbitration, it's the player saying, this is why I deserve more, and the team saying, this is why you don't, and it literally has caused divorces before. And with how well he played, if he decides he wants to go, I at the very least want maximum value. If he wants to stay, I want him under contract on this team for at least the next 3 or 4 years. And I am now officially concerned.
From everything that I've seen, I don't view Crouse as a guy who's going to get really upset about arbitration. I do agree with arbitration. I don't think it's a smart thing to elect for consistently. I think that we had a video on our channel previously about Bill Armstrong needs to be careful, right? I think that's what one of our biggest concerns is. Look at how you treated Connor Garland, right? You didn't even call him to tell him that you weren't going to re-sign him. This is stuff that you need to be careful about, because if other players start hearing about this, they're not going to want to come to your team if they hear that your general manager is a dick, right? For lack of better words. So Bill Armstrong's got to be really careful. Now, obviously, arbitration doesn't mean you're a dick. I want to be very clear with that. Arbitration is a healthy, natural way of settling contract disputes that the NHL has devised, which is a good way of doing it. As unfortunate as it is, because like you're talking about, it is completely right. Like, you walk in, and the player goes, all right, so this is all my comparables. This is how much they're making. This is how much I want. And then the team sits down on the other side and goes, okay, well, you do this wrong. You do that wrong. Oh, you don't have the right attitude here. You don't do this right. Blah, 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 blah. And, you know, you're trying to build yourself up while the team is trying to break you down. And that is not always the healthiest thing. A lot of times you're better off having a good agent and letting the agent deal with that, and just not hearing it, because it can be really real messy. The interesting thing that I'm curious to see is I heard murmurs about how much he's asking for, or how much people speculate that he's asking for. I should start with that, because let's be real, a lot of these people don't have sources, they just speculate. I am curious, because we were thinking like 2.5, 3 mil, I want to say, on this channel. That's
it was somewhere in that ballpark. It was, a pretty affordable contract. What have you heard, rumor wise, speculation wise?
I've heard like 4.5. So that
would
gets
it be
a little
for 3 years.
I don't know term length, but I do know that like the speculation is like that much. So I'm really curious to see, because that is significant. Like a difference of $1 million is significant. You know, $1 million gets you another player on your roster, another young kid who's signed his entry-level contract. So it's interesting to see. We'll see. I hope him the best. I hope that he gets a good amount, because this team's not struggling for money. Well, let me clarify here. Obviously, this team doesn't make money. I'm sure that there's back-end struggles, but this team isn't poverty-ridden to the point of they're taking on $20 million in dead contracts to get to the cap floor, so that they actually only have to pay $20 million in real-world money, right?
Yeah, that's what it was before, when we had all these owners that had no money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, when obviously, just I'm gonna keep it like a 20-second side tangent. When the Coyotes were sold to stay in Glendale and everything, they sold it to an ownership group that had no money. Like, and that was a huge reason why they just didn't spend on talent. But going back to Crouser, if it's a 3-year contract, I could eat $4 million. I think that it sounds a little high, but if it is, in general, especially because the position we're in general, a difference of $1 million, okay, just bump it up, maybe even meet halfway, bump it up another $500,000. So if we were at 3.5 max, sure. But it also comes down to, if you're in a position where you're trying to look at your cap 3 years from now, 4 years from now, hey, we want to be able to sign. Let's just pretend Auston Matthews goes UFA. We want to be able to offer Matthews market. We are only projected to have this amount of cap space. We want that extra $1 million, just freeze it up. Let's just say, for the sake of argument. So we're not quite in a cap crunch. We're not quite in a spot where we need to be thinking as frugally. But it is always good to try to sign the most optimal contracts you can. And if market saying Crouse is worth 3.5, I think while it's a little higher than our original projections, if that's where the market's at, sure. It's just and no disrespect to Lawson. If for whatever reason you ever watch this, no disrespect, huge fan. But when you hit 4.5, something in my gut is like, should you just do it, or is that maybe a little much? Like, what's it based on? And again, that's just a speculative rumor you were hearing, but that's something in my gut is telling me, ooh.
So for me, if Crouse can consistently be that top 6 player that he has always projected to be, putting up 25 goals, consistently being top 5 in hits every season, I think that it's worth it to me. The scary part is something that you've brought up consistently on the show, that he's a power forward. You sign him to a long-year deal, you can end up having a player who is making $4 million who ends up on your fourth line because their body is taking a lot of bumps and bruises, right? And things begin to break down. So that's the biggest scare to me. Personally, I know that our timeline has been 2 years. I don't want to see this deal kicked down the road to 2 years because I feel like he will walk in free agency. He will be hitting his prime. He's a good player. And if we're running out of space because we just have young prospects coming in, right? Dylan Guenther is going to be a top 6 prospect on the left wing. Lawson Crouse is a left wing. Are you telling me that Lawson Crouse is going to take Dylan Guenther's role or Nick Schmaltz or Clayton Keller's role? Probably not. So he's more likely to be kind of a third line guy if I would have to slot him in the next 3 to 4 years. And if that's the case, are you willing to put $4 million in a third line guy? Right?
I'd say for a 3-year contract with his upside, yes. Only because by the time it's time for those players to come up, it would be easier to move. And again, this is not disrespect in any way for Lawson. It's just if
business.
We have to start thinking business, it's like I have no problem paying him if we're giving him 3 years. Like if it maybe 4, we can talk. Like to me, I don't want 5 or more. So it's like if we're talking 4.5 for 4 years. Yeah. You can get out from under that if you need to. He's right around his prime. Value should be up. Hey, nothing against you, Lawson, but Gunner's up. Geeky's up. Cooley's up. We just don't have a space for you. We're going to move you to another team that we think you'll be successful at. Whatever. So it's like, maybe it just sounds higher than it is, but it's like just be careful with this one. Do not alienate him. Do not talk like he's a bad player because he's not. In no context is Crouse a bad player. He's a middle 6 guy, depending on what roster. Mostly probably a top 6 guy, but let's just middle 6 is fair assessment. It's what he's mostly played. Just be very cautious when you're signing this contract, and I really want to see Crouse on the team at least for the next 2 years minimum.
I would say contract-wise, it's got to be higher than 2 years, and it's got to be less than 5. I think it's got to be a 3 or 4 year deal. Ideally, I want to see him under $4 million. But if you can get him for $4 million, I think I'd be willing to accept that because that's right around the time where, if you look at the contracts, they all kind of line up. You're going to have money around that time, so it's not going to hurt you nearly as much. I would say a 3 year, if they're really trying to meet in the middle, right? Like let's say the Coyotes are saying $3.5 million and he's saying $4.5 million. Meet in the middle, go with $4 million, 3 year. I think I'd be happy with that. If you go 4x4, $4 million for 4 years, I feel like that might be not ideal. I feel like the length might be a little too long, and it could hurt the team long term. It's one of those things. It's very, very interesting. If he can project out, right? Because he's hitting 25. Like he's not that old, and power forwards and bigger players in general do take longer to kind of turn into powerhouses in the NHL, right? It takes them longer. They do have to sizzle a little bit longer down in the pan. So we could see an explosion of offense from him. It could happen, but it also could revert back to previous seasons where he couldn't score. He was hitting how many posts? Oh my goodness. There was that season where he probably had 25 posts. It was crazy. And yeah, so it's curious. I'm curious. It is banana lands a little bit with that contract.
Pretty much, here's the best way for just to end this segment, just put it in context. Are we getting close to prime Lucic, or are we getting the last couple of years of Christian Fischer? It's power forwards. You have to look at which are you getting. Are you getting someone that had upside, that peaked at this upside, and is now going to start going down? Or are you getting a guy that they're going to stay about where they're at or a little higher for the next few years? And if you genuinely feel that, which I think Krauser probably stays where he's at or goes higher for the next couple of years, take the risk. But just don't put the extra year on it. Don't be careful with the term. If you want to give him a little more in cap, I think that's fair. Like I said, it just sounds like it's a little much for him. We could just be used to trying to have the smallest contracts we can. That could just be the way our brain's wired. So if it sounds a little high, but you can maintain term, go for it. Keep Krauser here. I want to keep Krauser here.
Yeah, I think like a 3 year is healthy amount. It'll kick you to that point in which like you'll still have enough money to operate properly. Cooley will still be on his entry level. Gunner will still be on his entry level. Like you'll still have a lot of money sitting around for players that are going to need contracts if they project out properly. So I think 3 year, $4 million. That's what I'm going down with. If it's less than that, I'm tap dancing. If it's term length is longer than 4, I will be a little nervous.
All right, you got any more closing thoughts you want? Because I think we hit a pretty healthy length on this episode. Any last words?
Remember to like, to subscribe, to follow us on all of your social platforms and whatnot and listening platforms. We are on Twitter. We are
at Desert Moon
Hawk. we are doo-doo posting all the time, personal and non-personal stuff, if you know what I mean. Yeah, follow us on all the platforms and stuff. We're having fun here, so join the fun.
Right. I got a closing comment for you. So,
okay.
We've talked about it before, especially me, how the goalposts are always going to change, the arguments are always going to change. I made a lot of hockey fans angry with my little tweet a couple days ago. Like, I'm so sorry that your teams don't bring you happiness and you got to find fulfillment trying to get my team to relocate. I saw a handful of them talking about, oh, well, we just want your team to be ran better. When you start seeing that, just laugh at them. Just don't harass people, but just laugh. Make it known that their arguments are stupid and we don't take them seriously. It'll make them angrier, which makes it funnier. That's what we're going for here. If you're going to do post, do it responsibly and do it properly.
Yes. It is an interesting time to be a Coyotes fan. I will say that. There was a lot of justified anger at us, and rightfully so. But it is fun watching people try to push a narrative that has no base, and it just sliding out from under them.
So remember, tell your local hockey fan that can't deal with the Coyotes being here to simply cope. Simply cope.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. We are going to end it there. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next week.